Hey, how's it going, Captains? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I am going to discuss my thoughts on the new aircraft carrier in 0.8.0 so far. Now, not too long ago, Wargaming has released the hot fix, which fixed some exploits and of course changed some parameters with anti-air. So this gameplay you're watching is with the hot fix. This is post hot fix. So I spent the week testing extensively with the new aircraft carriers, at the same time playing battleships, cruisers, and destroyers because I want to get an idea of this new environment. But most of my time is dedicated to aircraft carriers because that is the main point of the rework. Now, initially, I was having a hard time with this new experience because I'm going from 150k damage, 120k, averaging around 80 to 100k with my carriers, to day one, doing no damage in my first game, barely did anything in the second game, and averaging 10k. Now, eventually, I progressed to 30k, 40k, and more like 60k, which seems to be the cap for me as an average game. My best game I had so far is with the Enterprise, and I scored 154k damage. Now, the 154k was pretty much given to me because the enemies I was facing weren't really trying to at least defend themselves against me. So, I really do love the experience. I find it fun. There's a lot of options to pick. There's a lot of choices to do. More weapons to play with. In the previous version, if I'm playing like a Japanese carrier or American carrier or whatever carrier I was playing, I would just torpedo, force the damage control, and follow up with fire. With the new aircraft carriers, I have to decide with rocket planes to harass, torpedo for the damage if I can do it, or dive bomb for the hell of it, because it's really fun to dive bomb with the new aircraft carriers. Currently, my most favorite carrier to play is the Enterprise because of its versatility with the AP bombs, the fighters with its rockets, and the torpedoes are much more easier to use from time to time compared to the Midway. So I do like the new experience, but there are plenty of problems to talk about, and there's also plenty of good things that came out of the aircraft carrier rework in general. I know for a fact that a lot of people weren't happy about how anti-air is working from both sides. At the same time, there are certain classes of ships that I played that was not fun in this carrier rework, specifically destroyers. So let's talk about the positives because a lot of people overlook the positives. The first thing that was a major change from the previous version that I definitely appreciate is the shift in balance. In the previous version, there is a number of players who hold a 20 to 40% win rate in World of Warships on their carriers. We're talking about probably 40% of the population, and that is very massive. And there is a number of players who hold a win rate of 60% and above. So what happens when you get in a team where you have a 40% win rate carrier player versus a team that has an 80% win rate carrier player? There's a good chance that you're going to lose pretty much 100%. That is an issue. Now, I understand that a good player should be awarded the victory. Understandable, absolutely understandable. When I put all my effort into a game, I should be guaranteed a win. But at the end of the day, I gotta accept the reality that World of Warships is a team-based game. Just because a player is good doesn't mean that it always guarantees victory. Because on both sides, you have to work as a team. No matter how well you play, if your team fails, you collapse with them. And does it make sense for the other team who has a 20 to 30% win rate carrier player to lose automatically? Do they deserve to be automatically losing on their team? No. Those players on their team, the team that has the poor carrier player, will put in their effort to carry that particular carrier player to victory. And I've been in games where I was on the team with a weaker carrier player, but I didn't choose to throw down my gun and surrender. No, I'd take my ship out and try my best to win the game. And yes, I have won games in those situations, but it was a lot harder than before. So what I'm trying to say is that in the previous version, with the difference in skill And the influence that causes the difference was a problem. I didn't like the landslide victory and giving a go pass for the enemy team because they have a way better carry player. One player should not drag down the entire team's effort. That's why I strongly believe a lot of people who weren't happy about the new carry rework was that reason. They wanted the fact that they want dominance. They want absolute dominance. They want to keep their dominance with the Hakuryu and Midway. And again, I understand that you want to dominate, but most of people's enjoyment is to work as a team and not lose automatically because one player screws up. When you want to play a ship that is not an aircraft carrier, are you going to be happy about the fact that you have a carrier player who's not doing so well and then you just lose the game? No, unless you only play carriers. So in the new version, carriers don't have that much influence. Its influence is pretty much on par with most other classes of ships so far from what I've seen. Now, it's a little bit too early for me to call it, but within the week, that's how I felt. There was no longer those one-sided games, which is a thumbs up for the new aircraft carriers. Now, the second positive thing that came out of this carrier rework is that games are much more proactive. One of the issues I have with World of Warships in the previous version was people playing too passively, or teams on each end are going in opposite direction. Part of that reason is because of the lack of intelligence. Were you in a situation where your entire team lemon trains to the west side and you choose to go to the east side because there is flag C, and you probably have like 2 ships or 3 ships with you, and when you're taking the flag you meet one destroyer, and so it's just one destroyer. So you fire your guns, and the destroyer fires back at you. You kind of fight them, but all of a sudden, your priority target says that there's 5 people around this corner. Yeah, you didn't know that because nobody spotted those ships, and you didn't know at all that they were gonna go to the flag C. It's the lack of information, the lack of direction of going where you position your ship, what kind of ships you're dealing with. With the new aircraft carriers, you're given that early game information to make the right choice, hopefully, or the best choice to go to a certain area on the map and play the way strategically as you want it. Because before, for me, when I was playing way back in beta, this was a common thing because there's more carriers in beta than throughout the World of Warships lifetime until now. And that was something I take it for granted because when I was playing my cruisers, I was trying to figure out where the destroyers are at. When I'm playing my Japanese destroyer, I want to know where the American destroyers are at. When I'm playing battleships, I don't want to go take my New Mexico, which is so slow, to the west side, while all the enemy battleships suddenly appear to the east side. Then I have to sail back to the east, spending 15 minutes of my game as a full HP New Mexico because I didn't know where the enemy team is going. And for that reason, in the new aircraft carriers, it has brought back that active intelligence on the map. Now, that's a good thing, but at the same time, that was a bad thing. And the bad thing was that it heavily influenced the spotting on destroyers. Destroyers were having a hard time in the new rework. And I understand that because one of the crucial things about destroyers is concealment. Ships like the Shimakaze, the Yugubo, or the Japanese destroyer, or even American destroyers that really rely on stealth, ambushing enemies, and taking capture points without being spotted. With the new aircraft carriers, there is a constant travel of planes that can possibly just slip right past by a destroyer on accident and then spot that destroyer. Now, for me, if I were to fix this issue, I would strongly believe in the fact that a carrier has to stay in the spotting zone of the destroyer for roughly around 2 seconds before spotting it. Because I think it's kind of stupid how planes just touch the outer radius of the concealment range, and right away the destroyer gets spotted for a brief moment, and that plane's going to come back. I believe that if a plane's going to spot a destroyer, it has to fly over a destroyer for over 2 seconds. Or 1 second. I don't know. Pick a number. Wargaming is trying to figure out a way to fix this issue, but that's my suggestion. Is it going to be the best solution? Probably not, but it sounds like a good suggestion to me. So I did have some problem with playing with destroyers. Was it to a point where I want to quit playing destroyers? Not really, because again, I said that with the fact that you're giving so much information throughout the game consistently throughout, as the game progresses, I took that and use it as an advantage. If I see the enemy team is going A, I'm going to go C or D with my destroyer. If I see a enemy destroyers, all the enemy destroyers huddle up at B because the carriers spot those destroyers, I'm going to take one of the flags on A and C and torpedo B. So I use the carrier to my own advantage, but I don't believe that at the moment people are going to use that technique until as the carriers mature. So that was a negative part of the new carrier rework, but I think that it can be overcome with some tweaks and fixes to how the spawning works with destroyers, and at the same time, hopefully players learn to adapt, which is too optimistic of me. Now, let me talk about my complaints about the carriers themselves. I have no clue, and it really does piss the shit out of me why I can't control my carrier while the planes are in the sky. I mean, I can let my planes fly in a straight line and control my carrier with a tactical map, but sometimes my carrier goes in reverse. It really just pisses me off. I wish there was an option where the planes are in the sky and you can set a waypoint where the planes will just circulate while you control your carrier in third person. Why? It's because sometimes I need to maneuver manually, and not with the freaking, whatever you want to call it, the autopilot, because the autopilot is just so horrible at times. I hate it, especially on maps like this, because there's so many islands. So I don't know why they made it so difficult to maneuver. Now, I've been hearing about new things about fixing the flood, or at least rework how flooding works, because when you play a battleship or cruiser and you get flooded, it's pretty much guaranteed a death in most cases. So what Wargaming is going to do is that they're probably going to reduce the flood timer to like 1 minute or maybe 30 seconds. Personally, for me, I would like to increase the flood chance, but reduce the flooding time to like 10 seconds to 15 seconds if the player is willing to work with torpedo bombers. It's just an idea, not something I demand right away, but it's just a suggestion. Until it's tested, it might be a good idea, it might be a really horrible idea. But I've been hearing about how there's certain situations where people absolutely wish that flooding with the carriers, when the carriers drop the torpedo bombers, they feel like they couldn't do anything about it. So that is going to be a problem that Wargaming has to learn to hammer out. Another problem I had with carriers is how the mouse is just so floaty. It feels really, the controls just is not there for me, because you can move your mouse to fine-tune your aim, but sometimes I don't want to move the mouse, but my computer detects it, and as a result it makes my reticle inaccurate at the worst time. So that's a complaint about the control. So the camera, controlling the camera on the carrier while the planes are in the sky, the mouse input with the planes can be really annoying. Now, anti-air, the elephant in the room. I don't know how I feel about anti-air, because sometimes I feel anti-air is fair, sometimes anti-air is not fair on both sides, on the carrier and on the surface ship. I was playing my Yumo, and for whatever reason, the Yugumo, one of the worst anti-air in the game, I shot down 10 planes. But then when I play something like my Alabama, I shot down no planes. Now, part of that reason is because it was before the hotfix, where people were abusing the F key. So that was, the anti-air, I like the idea, but I wish it was more fine-tuned to more, reasonable, where it's the enemy carrier versus you in the ship interaction, and not RNG based. Now, with the recent new hotfix, they have really, in my opinion, messed it up greatly. We're talking about comparing a 105 millimeter medium, or I think it's long range anti-air of a Prince Eugen to the same anti-air on the Scharnhorst, and for whatever reason, what Wargaming has posted in the hotfix was that they're gonna beef up the anti-air for tier 8 ships and above because of modern fire control system, and as a result, with the same gun, the Prince Eugen anti-air was pretty much 4 to 5 times better than the Scharnhorst, which makes no sense to me. So yeah, that is really my take on it. Now, the biggest thing that I was disappointed of, this is something I was absolutely disappointed about the CV rework, was how the community handled this. I mean, rarely did I see anyone post things on the forum or in the comment section about fixing aircraft carriers. They were only talking about how they hate carriers or they love carriers. They hate carriers. This is a problem because the anti-air was broken and nobody was suggesting how to fix them. And part of the problems I have with the carrier rework with the community was using the Hakuryu as a reason why the rework was a bad idea. Because the Hakuryu, before the hotfix, if you didn't know, I'm sure everyone knows by now, was abusing the F key. It had stealth torpedoes, so it was basically Shimikaze in the sky, and people were using Hakuryus showing 500,000 damage, 400,000 damage. Carriers are overpowered. I don't understand why people think that one ship in the game represents the overall concept of a carrier. I haven't seen the major community contributors focus on the Lexington, the Shokaku, the Ryujo, the Ranger. They might bring out one gameplay of it, but they haven't really talked about it. People misinterpret the carrier rework with the Hakuryu. And you might say, oh, well, it's not just the Hakuryu that was overpowered, the Royal Navy aircraft carriers. Well, if I log in right now, on the day that I upload this video, because I'm probably going to upload a day after I made the video, will I see the Royal Navy carriers in the tech tree? And the short answer is no. Why? Is because the aircraft carriers are still in a work in progress. When a ship is in work in progress, I can't believe I'm telling you guys this after this game being released in 3 years, it is subject to change. Which means that if the Royal Navy carrier is broken, they can always change it. Wargaming can change it. It's still being tested. You guys remember when the German destroyers came out? The fiasco with the German destroyers being misrepresented by the community contributors. It was a week before the German destroyers were about to be released, and everyone said the go-ahead to release the German destroyers because they seemed very nice to play. They were good. They had hydro. Their guns were like this and that, and people were excited. When it hit the live server, people bought the German destroyers with their free XP, their hard-working free XP, or going down the line of the German destroyers, and they felt that something was off. German destroyers did not play like what the community contributors sold them on. And the reason why is because when the community contributors were making the video and it was like 5 days before the release, they said it was good, but the destroyers were changed on the live server without anyone noticing or been notified about the changes. Just like that, within a week, Wargaming can change the entire identity and personality of the German destroyers. Why? It's because the German destroyers were work in progress, and part of the problem was the communication. The point is that they can change everything in a week or even in a day if they really tried. And with the hotfix, they changed a lot of things with it. So a lot of the story was more focused on Hakuryu and British aircraft carriers and showing how powerful the scoring 200,000 damage, 300,000 damage, and yet I'm stuck at tier 8 and tier 6, spending quality time with carriers that I know for a fact that people are going to spend a lot of time grinding on because there's no more tier 7 or tier 9 carriers where most of the action of the carriers will be at. And people think that because the Hakuryu is overpowered with the property of transitivity, that means the Lexington, the Enterprise, the Shokaku are overpowered. The only carrier that I hear or heard about that was genuinely powerful and was not exploiting things from the carrier rework mechanic like the Hakuryu was the Graf Zeppelin. Because the Graf Zeppelin has a very easy drop zone with her dive bomber. She has pretty nice torpedoes. I think they're deep water torpedoes. I don't know, but the Graf Zeppelin, I've been hearing good things about her, and she's currently the top performing tier 8 carrier. Aside from that, the Lexington, the Shokaku, the Ryujo, the Ranger, there's problem with tier 8 carriers being matched up to tier 10 because there's no existence of tier 9s to fill up that spot. So someone's got to take the spot for tier 9, which has to be tier 8. So there's games where the carriers are just useless. Now, with the hotfix, which just improved the anti-air and make it much more difficult beyond tier 8, you just witnessed me in the game in the beginning of the match where I just harassed the destroyers. Why? It's because it's the only viable target. I'm saying this because, well, if they buff the anti-air for cruisers and battleships to the extreme where it's kind of pointless for me to strike them if there's two of them together, then the only target that would logically pick is destroyers. And that's what I did. Now, I personally feel like I would focus more on the cruisers and battleships, but you gotta do what you gotta do in order to do well in the game, right? So if taking at battleships is not a choice because they buff the anti-air on the battleships and the cruisers, then I just left with the options with harassing against the enemy carrier, which is too far to harass and not worth the time, or harass the destroyers, which in the first game, which I personally feel like they played poorly because you saw the Ognivoy went back into the camp when he knows I'm here. He left the Mogami, I believe it was a Mogami. But the point is, when you buff the anti-air, especially, well, first you screwed up with the tier 7 and tier 8 split of anti-air. The difference is just too massive. But when you buff the anti-air for one group of ship and don't focus on, the overall concept of anti-air, then you're left with only one option on the table. Why would I strike a battleship? Why would I strike a cruiser when I know I'm going to lose all my planes? Just harass the destroyers, and if the destroyers don't come out, then I'm just going to play the boring game of just flying my planes around and waiting till late game until somebody decides to get impatient and take the flag. So the direction of the CVs, like I said, it's a starting point. There are plenty of problems, but there's also plenty of benefits of this new CV rework. But so far I am liking the carriers, not liking the anti-air from time to time on both sides, on the surface ship and on the carriers side, and of course how the concealment, how being randomly spotted with carriers can be a problem at times, but that's also a benefit with the new carrier rework. So that's my opinion. I know for a fact that by the end of this video, someone's gonna really hate me for what I said, and might be others might agree with me because I hit the bell on it, but that's how I feel about the new carrier rework. There is much more balance, at least to me, probably because it looks like a big nerf compared to the previous, the previous carrier version. But at the same time, you kind of gain a lot more utility, like spotting more often and not, getting harassed by one strong player versus, a weak player. There's no longer that case. So there are positive things and there's plenty of bad things to come. So down the road, I do hope Wargaming and the community at some point when they come to their senses, because I was watching a bunch of videos and I feel like it wasn't constructive. People were just blaming Wargaming this and not suggesting any constructive criticism. The only person that I genuinely respected when discussed about the carrier rework was Jingles. He said that you got to give it some time and there's plenty of things to tweak. We can't expect the carrier rework to be perfect without testing it on the live server, because we've been testing the carriers in the test server for since December. December is when they opened to the public test server, and they also had games in November when it was closed. So we've been testing for 2 months and nobody found out about abusing the F key, because we're facing targets that were bots and it doesn't represent how a real game goes. So it did came at a cost and an inconvenience for others who hate carriers, absolutely. But at the end of the day, I gotta keep my fingers crossed that Wargaming will follow the people, listen to people who actually giving constructive criticism, and fix it as soon as possible. But I won't be expecting it to be perfectly fixed until probably 2 months. I wouldn't say perfectly, but well enough that people will accept carriers and carrier players will accept how carriers work in the game. So aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.